Thank you. Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about methods to engage young learners. And you know that it's a short presentation, so I'm going to share a few tips and throw you some big ideas for you to think about. Now, first, in order to engage young learners, we want our students to be excited to learn. So in order to do that, the first tip that I want to share with you. Oh, how do I move my slide? Okay, here. So the first thing that I want to share with you is show enthusiasm. If we are not enthusiastic about what we are teaching, how are our students going to be? So make sure that you always interact with your students. Try to show them how interesting and fun learning can be. Once they see that you are excited to teach them, they will be excited to learn. Let's move on. And I want you to think about classroom dynamics. In order to make our students be open to learning, classroom dynamics has to be positive, safe, and familiar. So always start your lessons with something familiar that will make your students feel safe, secure, and confident in their abilities. And you can always try to end your lesson with something that you know your students can do, something familiar and achievable. So your students, you can make sure that your students always finish your lesson a positive I can do it note. Because it is very important to keep our students motivated, happy, and open to learning. The next strategy is to make your activities meaningful. It is very important that your students have to perceive your activities as being meaningful. Because if students do not consider your learning activities worthy of their time and effort, they might not engage in a satisfactory way. So how can we do that? To ensure that activities are personally meaningful, we can, as the slide you see here, we can connect activities with students' previous knowledge and experiences, or highlight the value of an activity in personally relevant ways. Or you can demonstrate why an activity is worth doing and when and how it is used in real life. Okay, move on. Okay, this is a tip. Random student selection. Choosing students randomly is one of the easiest ways to engage students in learning. A simple cup with prepped sticks will do the trick when you need to select someone to answer a question or read aloud to the class. When students know they might be called on at any moment, they are more likely to pay attention to you. So you can try that. The next strategy is making activities collaborative. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to do this all the time because there are certain parts of your lessons that are necessarily to be teacher-centered. Also, your students need time to think. They need time to work alone to think, to reflect, to plan before you ask them to do something with their classmates. You need to give them some time to work alone. So here are some examples that advice for you. You can ask your students to do peer work or group work for controlled practice exercises. For this one, you can ask students to do the task by themselves first, and then compare their answers with a partner. And then the pair can then compare with another pair in a group of four. In this way, the students have a greater chance of getting correct answers. Now for reading, especially if the text is quite long, you can use the jigsaw reading technique. You know the jigsaw reading, right? You assign one part of the text to one group or one student. And then students first work on just only one part of the text and then exchange the information they have found out. And for speaking and listening, for example, you can ask students practice reading the dialogue aloud in pairs. you can ask them to decide on how to present the dialogue as a short dramatization for the whole class. For example, they can use different voices to present the dialogue. And for writing, you can use suitable text as writing frames, and then you ask students to work together to substitute certain vocabulary and to make a new one. Okay, so these are some examples for you to think about. The next one is project. Um, project is really good for engaging students because it relies on teamwork, and also it caters for different learning styles and abilities. When students work on a project in small groups, there is a range of roles to suit the abilities and inclinations of each individual, which is why it is very useful and very effective if you use projects with your students. Okay, another big idea I want you to think about is learner autonomy. It's the ability to take charge of one's own learning, and is the result of teachers releasing some of the control over aspects of students' learning. Now think about this. Have you ever provided choices in your classes for your students? How often do you let children exercise their right to choose in your classroom? Because today's presentation is a short one, so I can share one very simple thing that you can do. This is what we call awareness raising activities. And this is about to invite your students to talk about their favorite activities. You ask students to think about which activities they enjoy the most. Once they have identified these activities, get them to reflect on why they like them. This also gives you an idea of the students' motivations and their opinions. Okay, the next tip I would like to share is to make sure your students always learn in a fun atmosphere. Use humor. It is very important because it brings a sense of pleasure and creates a common positive emotional experience that the students share with each other and the students share it with you. And don't create a predictable learning environment. Now, in my earlier slides, previous slides, when I talk about classroom dynamics, I said that you should, start a lesson with something familiar, but I don't want you to do the same thing all the time. If your students know what to expect from your lessons day in and day out, they will start to disengage from certain parts of the lesson. Keeping students on their toes by mixing up your strategies, mixing up your activities, use multimedia will keep them actively engaged in the important information you want them to learn. Okay, this is my last slide. It's about caring. Always show your students that you care about them. Caring is always at the top of my list. Demonstrations of caring doesn't mean that you need to know the details of each individual student's private life. Caring means you recognize each student as a unique person with different learning needs, with unique learning needs. And we are here because we care, right? We care about our teaching, we care about our students. So because of this topic, I shared a few engagement strategies with you. But if you think about this, not only do engagement strategies enable us to capture the interest of our students as they learn the skills, also, if you use those strategies to engage your students also experience what it feels like to be engaged in learning. And this is a lifelong gift. That is why this is very important to engage our students in our classes. You can reach me or find me on Facebook with this email, vivian.wang@out.com. And thank you, everyone. Hope you have fun with your students.